Alright, 5th grade. Happy Monday. Everybody had a good weekend. What we're going to start doing today is we're going to just take a few notes and practice a little bit with plot. Alright? So what you're doing right now is on this slide, you are watching this video. As I continue down on these next slides here, you will copy down what I have. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 slides of notes, and then we'll just do one practice looking at plot. What is the plot? What are the different parts of the story? Okay? What we'll do is we will take this, we'll continue to work on it tomorrow, and we'll kind of try to figure out plot and how it works with wholes. Can we decide what the plot is? And things like that. Okay? So, here on the second slide here, what is plot? This little picture here, I put that in there. We're not going to use this diagram today. We'll start using it tomorrow. What we're going to talk about today is what is the plot. So I want you to copy this down with me. Right? The plot is the sequence of events in a story. Okay, so all the plot is, it's just all of the things that happen in a story, from all the way in the beginning till the end. Okay, that's what the plot is. What happens in the story. Okay, it sounds pretty easy, right? Just the things that happen in a story, that's plot. But it's going to be a little bit more complex than that as we start to look at this diagram tomorrow, because there's the beginning, and then there's kind of this this build-up. There's a little suspension, maybe a little drama that's happening, right? Then the climax is the big moment, the most exciting, intense moment of the story, and then it gets a little bit slower, and then we find out how it ends. Okay, so it's not just the sequence of events in a story. It's you know, how do all of these events cause the next one? Okay, so on the slide here, the plot is the sequence of events in a story. Okay, the 3 most important pieces of plot. The first one is exposition. I want you to copy this down with me, please. We're going to ask the question, what is the setting and the characters? Okay. So the exposition here, this is the beginning of a story, right? We find out where the story takes place, when the story takes place, and who is in the story. That's the exposition. All right. If you think about any sort of movie, the exposition is in the beginning, where you get to meet the main character and you get to see where the main character lives, and you get to see where and when the story takes place. That's the exposition, that's the beginning. Okay? All right, the climax. I already told you about the climax a little bit, but the climax here, what we're going to say is the most intense part of the story. Okay, I'm also going to say this here. It's the most intense part of the story. We might call this the high point. Okay, so maybe the most intense, the most important part of the story. Okay, we call it the high point because here it is. You might think of it as the tallest point on the plot diagram here. Okay, climax. Okay, then the resolution. Is just how the story ends. Okay, the resolution in wholes. We know that Stanley and Zero, they get to go home. They're happy ever after. They're rich. That's the resolution, right? So in the beginning, we find all these problems. The resolution is how does the story end? Let's fix these problems here. Okay. If you need to pause at any point during this video today, make sure you do. I'm going to move on here to the practice. We're going to practice together a little bit. All right. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at the short story. I know you've already heard the short story. We're going to look at just a small one today, and then what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to do a few short stories, but we're also going to look at some videos, okay, and decide what is the plot of the videos. So here we go. The fire at school. The news was all over school. Some freshman boys were planning on starting a fire the next day in hopes of getting out of a math test. It seemed like everybody knew. It was all anybody was talking about. Christy was shocked. She wondered what she should do. She wondered what she should do to try and stop it. But then she realized that everybody already knew. Surely somebody had already told a teacher or a parent, and there would be no fire. Christy decided not to do anything. The next day, the fire alarm went off during Christy's first class. Everybody rushed outside. While they were waiting, Christy noticed a few kids being put in an ambulance. She couldn't believe that nobody had done anything to stop this from happening. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start up here at the exposition, the beginning. The setting, we know it's at school. Characters, we have Christy. And her classmates. Right, so that's the exposition in the story here. This is the beginning. This is when we find out where and when the story takes place, and we find out who is involved, who's in the story. Okay, the climax, the most intense part of the story right here. This is when the fire alarm goes off. Kids are in the ambulance. Okay, so that's the most intense part of the story, right? It's the high point. That's bad, right? It's not always a good thing. Sometimes a bad thing happens, like a fire goes off, right? And kids end up in the hospital or in the ambulance. That's the climax. That's the most intense part of the story right here. Okay? And the resolution, how the story ends. Don't have a lot of information, but you know Christy is so surprised. She's so surprised. How could this happen, right? She couldn't believe that nobody had done anything to stop this from happening. So surprised. Nobody spoke up. Okay, so that is our plot right there. All right, so we have the exposition, talking about the setting and the characters. The climax is when the actual fire happened, and the resolution is Christy is surprised that nobody said anything. Right? Resolution is the end of the story. Okay, make sure this is all done. All of these notes are done for today. We'll do some more practice tomorrow. I'll talk about plot most of the week. All right, so if you have any questions, please let me know.